You care deeply about your kids, you have solid values, and still you feel your stomach tighten when your teenagers ask for more freedom. Can I stay out later? Can we go to this party? Well, everyone else is allowed to do it. There's a part of you that wants to say yes. You remember being that age. I know I do. And there's a part of you that just wants to lock the door and throw away the key. I'm Dan Hayden, and this is the Positive Legacy Podcast for Christian Fathers. This week's episode is titled The Freedom Dilemma: How Dads Can Let Go Without Letting Go. Before we go any further, I want to say this clearly. Even if you don't have teenagers yet, even if you still have kids in elementary school, or your kids they're already grown up and they're out of the house, these episodes are still for you. The dynamics that we're going to talk about in this upcoming series called Parenting Teens in Real Time, things like control, influence, fear, trust, and repair. Those are not teen-only issues. They just get louder when you have teenagers. So if your kids are younger, you're laying the groundwork now for how you'll handle freedom and responsibility later. If your kids are older, you're probably going to recognize a lot of what I described, and you may even find language for things you've carried for years. Just a couple of days ago, I was at church and I was talking to an older gentleman. I don't know him, but I have admired him from afar for everything that he does for the church. Anyway, we were just talking about family stuff, and he asked me about my kids. And I said, I have 3 daughters and a son. The girls are all teenagers, and the son is 10. And I mentioned, their ages were 15, 13, and 10. And he smiled and just said something, boy, you're really in the thick of it. And to be honest with you, yeah, that feels pretty accurate. But I mentioned about, my girls, my 15-year-old girls, how they were really excited about getting their licenses. He immediately smiled and said, hey, that's awesome. That means you're doing something right. And that response kind of stuck with me. He wasn't complimenting my future driving curriculum. He wasn't saying, hey, great job teaching them parallel parking, which, by the way, as an aside, definitely one of my superpowers that I love to brag about. What he was noticing, though, was something deeper. When a teenager is excited to step into responsibility, that usually means they have not been shamed out of growing up. It usually means trust is present. It means freedom is being introduced as something good, not something terrifying or something to be afraid of. It suggests that somewhere along the way, home has felt safe enough, steady enough, and connected enough that becoming more adult just feels exciting and not threatening. And that is what this episode is about. Here's where I want to go with you this week, specifically right now. First, I want to name the difference between control and influence, especially when your fears are lit up. Second, I want to show you how that fear tends to show up in real teen moments. And lastly, I want to give you a simple way to start shifting from I have to control everything to I'm committed to being a steady influence, even when I can't guarantee outcomes. Let me start with a scene from my own house. Not long ago, one of our twins was stepping into a new season of independence. More conversations about driving, more time with friends, more late practices in youth groups and social stuff like that. On paper, this is exactly what we want. We are raising adults. We want them to grow into wise, capable, independent young women. In fact, we tell them all the time, we love who you are, and we cannot wait to see the women that you become. But even talking about driving, just letting them practice, imagining them out on the road, thinking about the day they'll have that license, that lights something up in your nervous system. As an aside, I'm not a very good driving instructor. I let my kid drive like a quarter of a mile without her seatbelt on. And as soon as she parked it and realized she never seatbelt on, I failed her. Okay. All right. Back to the saboteurs, right? So in those moments, my hypervigilant saboteur started whispering, hey, what if something happens on the way? My controller says, you should track down every move, monitor every minute. You got to lock this down. My judge then piled on, if anything goes wrong, this one's on you. Good dad wouldn't let this slip. Meanwhile, on the outside, she's just excited. Dad, I'm ready. I want to drive. Same moment, but very different inner worlds. That's what we're dealing with when teen freedom scares us. Let's talk about control versus influence. Control says, if I can just manage every variable, nothing bad will happen. Influence, on the other hand, says, I can't manage every variable. My job is to be clear, consistent, and connected enough that my voice still matters when I'm not in the room. Control is rooted in fear and the illusion that you can prevent all pain. Influence is rooted in commitment. No matter what happens, I'm not going anywhere. I will keep showing up. Control is the part of you that tries to white knuckle safety. Influence is the part of you that wants to talk, that wants to walk with your child into adulthood. The tricky thing is that for a long time, control actually works. When your kids are little, command and control is very appropriate. You don't negotiate with terrorists, right? You don't negotiate with a 2-year-old about running into the street. You just scoop them up. You don't negotiate with a 4-year-old who wants to have ice cream at 8:30 when it's dinner time. You say, hey, because I said so. And you know what? That's going to get you by. That's okay for now. But somewhere on middle school and definitely by high school, that job description starts to shift. And we've talked about this before. I've told my own kids, we have no idea what we're doing. We've never parented 15-year-old twins before. And that's true, right? But they've also never been 15-year-old twins before in this house, in this time, with these pressures. So the point is, all of us are still learning. We have to be humble enough to recognize that and articulate that to our kids as well. If we don't adjust from control to influence, here's what tends to happen. Your teen asks for more freedom than you feel ready to give. Hey, can I go to this thing where you don't know the parents? Can I stay out till midnight? Can I drive there myself once I'm allowed to? Inside, you feel that surge. Your chest tightens, your mind starts just running through scenarios, and your brain starts assigning meaning before you've even answered. They're not safe. I'm losing them. If I say yes and something goes wrong, that's on me. If I say no, I'm going to be the bad guy. If you don't notice that internal surge, your next move is probably going to come straight from a place of fear. For some of us, that looks like just clamping down. Yeah, absolutely not. That's ridiculous. Why would you even ask me that? For others, it looks like interrogation. Okay, who's going to be there? Are their parents home? Who's going to drive? What's the address? Where are you going to be? What time exactly? How many kids are going to be there? How many of them do I know? And look, some of those are pretty fair questions, but there's a difference between wise curiosity and anxious cross-examination. And your team, they will feel the difference immediately. For others, it might look like passive-aggressive resignation. Yeah, well, I mean, do whatever you want, I guess. Yeah, don't come crying to me if it all blows up. From your teen side, all of that lands somewhere between being smothered and being dismissed. If you clamp down hard, you may feel, they may feel, you don't trust me. You just want to control me. If you check out, they may feel, yeah, you don't actually care enough to help me think this through, do you? Either way, the danger is that they stop bringing their real life to you. And that's the part I want you to hear. Team freedom is not just about whether they get to go somewhere. It's about whether your relationship remains strong enough that they still want your voice in the room. When they're making decisions, you won't be there to control. The guy I talked about from church, he understood something very important. A teenager being excited for responsibility is a hopeful sign. It often means they feel invited into adulthood, not merely managed from the outside. It means they're not just living under rules. They're beginning to see themselves as capable of carrying responsibility. That's when influence builds. So how do we begin to shift? We're not going to solve all of the parenting teenager problems and issues and concerns in one episode, but I want to give you practical ways to handle these freedom conversations differently. As always, it has 3 parts. Name your fear, name your commitment, respond from your spirit-led self. First, name your fear. When your kid asks you for something that scares you, your instinct is to react. Instead, pause. Always pause and pay attention to what's happening inside of you. Notice the physical signal. Maybe it's a tight chest. Maybe your lower back starts getting real tight. Maybe there are fast thoughts, heat in your face. That's your body telling you This is a threat. This feels threatened. You're being threatened. Then name that inner voice, which is probably pretty loud. This is my hypervigilance spinning into just chaos in disaster scenarios. This is my controller trying to grab the wheel. This is my judge shaming me as a dad. Again, pause and name it. Then ask yourself quietly and honestly, what am I actually afraid this means? Maybe it's I'm afraid something will happen and I won't be there. Maybe it's I'm afraid they'll make the same mistakes I made. Spoiler, I didn't make any mistakes when I was a kid. Yeah, all right. Anyway, maybe it says, hey, I'm afraid that I'm losing influence. Or maybe it's simply, I'm afraid I can't keep them safe anymore. You don't have to dump all of that fear on your kid, but naming it inside yourself keeps it from secretly driving your response. Sometimes, especially with older teenagers, you can even say a small piece of it out loud. Hey, I want to answer this well, but I can feel some of your fears, getting loud in me. Give me a minute to think instead of just reacting. That kind of honesty can actually build trust. You're showing them what self-awareness really looks like. Okay, part 2, name your commitment. Control tells you my job is to make sure nothing bad happens. That is not actually your job. And trying to live like it will just wear you out and just strain your relationships. A better job description sounds like this. My commitment is to love you, tell you the truth, and set wise boundaries and stay connected even enough that my voice still matters. Before you give your teenager an answer, remind yourself, hey, I'm a committed dad. I'm not bailing. I don't have to get this perfectly right to be faithful. I can make the best decision I can with the information I have. And if I miss it, I can still repair. That posture changes your tone. It gives you room to slow down. It gives you permission to say, I need a minute, or even, yeah, I'm not sure yet. Lastly, I want you to respond from your sage. Once you've named your fear and your commitment, now you can actually have a conversation. This is where you ask wise questions instead of just delivering a verdict. Get curious. Hey, can you help me understand why this matters to you? What are you hoping this will be like? What do you think could be hard about this plan? What would being responsible look like in this situation? You're not handing over authority. You're inviting them into maturity. Then you can share your side. Hey, here's what I like about what you're asking. Here's what concerns me. And here's what I would need in order to feel good about this. Sometimes the answer is still no. Sometimes we're not interested in getting to a yes. And that's okay. But you may say, hey, look, I see this clearly matters to you, but I'm just not comfortable with this one. And here's why. I know you may not like that, but my job is to protect you even when you're frustrated with me. Sometimes the answer is yes, but with boundaries. Yes, once that time comes, I'd want to know who's going, what the plan is, and what time you'll be home. And if anything feels off, you call me and I'll come get you. No speeches, in that moment. I do this all the time with our daughters. They bombard me. Hey, Dad, can we go see this concert, in 8 months? I don't know, but let me check the calendar and let me talk to your mom about it and see, when we are able to make a decision. And they're okay with that. Also sometimes, like I just said, sometimes the answer is not yet, but here's what would build trust over time. I'm not ready for that level of freedom yet, but if over the next few months I see consistency in this area, that will help move us closer. That's influence. You're not just controlling access, you're shaping judgment. You're helping your teen connect freedom with responsibility, not freedom with secrecy. Secrecy. And that is a huge part of raising adults. I want to give you a practical challenge for this week. Take 10 quiet minutes and write down one area of teen freedom that scares you right now. Driving, curfew, friends, parties, dating, social media, whatever activates your fear the most. Then answer these 3 questions. What am I afraid this means? What am I actually committed to as their dad in this area? If I responded more from influence than control, what might a 10% different response look like next time? That's it. That's your challenge for the week. You're not writing a perfect script. You're just building awareness and clarity. And awareness is the first step to mastery. So if your kids are younger, you can do that exercise anyway. It will shape how you respond to smaller freedom questions now. If the kids are older, it may even open the door to a healing conversation. You might say, hey, I realized some of my parenting came more from fear than I understood at the time. And look, we're all still learning. And if you're listening to this and you're thinking, what, this is exactly where I am. I'm in the thick of it. I'm in the thick of teen years, and I don't want fear, anxiety, or over control to define this season. I want to invite you to take the next step. Inside my Positive Legacy Academy, this is the kind of work we do together. We take real situations, driving, dating, freedom, and friendships, hard conversations. That's been a current theme in our weekly meetings. And we take all of that and we slow them down. We identify what's happening inside of you, what you're actually committed to, and how to show up with steadiness, clarity, and connection. If you want support moving from control towards influence, I'd love to invite you to a free coaching call with me. On that call, we'll talk about stuff like where team freedom is scaring you right now, how you've been responding, what you want to be different in your presence and your tone, and whether walking with a group of other Christian like-minded dads in this same season would help you live this out. You can grab a time on my calendar that works for you using the link that's in the show notes. Hey, you're not supposed to have this all figured out. None of us have ever parented your kids at this age in this world before. But you do not have to stay stuck in white-knuckled control or quiet disengagement. As you look at this week, where's one place with your kid, with your teenager or your future teenager, where you're willing to move just 10% from freedom towards influence? As always, and until next time, stay rooted in grace, stay steady in mind and spirit, and keep building your positive legacy one small intentional moment at a time. Thanks, and I'll talk to you again next week.